All right, I think we are live now. Hey, Dad.
Hey, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good.
Good.
Welcome to everybody who's watching us. This is now the third video that we've done together where we talk about, faith, politics, and everything else. But this is going to be just for those who haven't seen any of our videos yet. We are doing a video series where my dad and I talk about different things. We are two different people living in very different worlds, but despite our differences, we usually get along for the most part.
That's right.
And while our worldviews are different, we agree on one important thing: that there is beauty and dignity in every human being, and too often that's forgotten. So today, we are going to be talking about, we had a very good question posed on Dad's Facebook page about the middle ground between the left and the right, and how it's seeming like it's getting farther and farther more partisan in our world. And so we're going to just be talking about that today.
Excellent. Yeah, very good. It seems to be distant. And Ruth posed that question. And really, we really appreciate people posing questions. And she just wrote it out. If, I see some of the people coming up and saying, hi, Tammy, and this is Michael, an awesome man from Hong Kong. And then, I just want to point out a few of the people that are coming on right now. And Michael, and Janet, and they're people that just have great hearts, Veronica. And so I think we're really looking for in this time where it's, and Valerie, yes, and just, it's really, they're looking for a sense of understanding. So, just one thing I was just saying, and there's Holden, Holden's a joy. So I don't know if you can see them coming up, but
I do. I see them popping up. Yeah, we got it already. People joining us. That's fun.
Yeah, that's a good deal. So, on the last one, son, we didn't announce it, did it on Facebook, and there were 20,000 people that listened. So it without promotion. So it's, obviously longing for people in the present culture to be able to see, the reality of how we can walk together in times like this, And so I think I'd love to refer to the first two just to say, we talked about my generation, your generation, kind of saw my definition, the David generation, Solomon generation, or Jedediah generation. So it's good if people get a chance to go and look at to get a foundation for where we're headed on this, So I just want to read you a poem. Amy Ann, your sister, for everybody, is going to have a baby. So, I wrote one of my famous.
One of your famous poems.
Poems, in my own eyes.
Yeah.
Cross between a haiku and I said Dr. Zeus and Nevermore. The Raven says Nevermore. Who is that?
Edgar Allan Poe.
So
that's your poem. Yeah. Okay.
Mix. So a poem for our first grandchild, and to you, your own uncle. Yes, you will be part of it all. You'll always be able to fly over any wall. Because of the world your naked eyes will see, and by looking through your eyes, we too will believe. You have so many, many glorious dreams, even while you're wide awake. Of the world, you're beautiful, mom and dad, and you will make. And that's Amy Ann Blake. I like that. Mm-hmm. We'll come along to see the release of wishes and prayers stored that wrong curves in life cannot take, but actually bring more. Yes, from him you always get more. When some exist through this life is amazed for some, you, my baby, will never miss the beauty and wonder of the day. And as a child, you will grow and grow and never be the same. And all those who will see you will realize life has changed and that they can be more than that they ever thought they could be. And through Yes, my child, you help all in love to be set free, because that's what happened when Amy Ann was born to me. And it was awesome when I wrote it, but I need a little work on it. But, basically.
I've always loved that write your poems and you don't let anybody tell you anything about meter or rhythm or something like that. It's just pure expression.
It's
postmodern poetry.
So, but I do see when I write it and then when I read it, it's actually Warren Fraser made it into a big deal to get on the wall, and so I think she was partly trying to read my handwriting.
So that's been translated.
Yeah, but,
that's like reading philosophy from like the ancient Greeks or the Germans, and you're like, it's hard to decipher, but the heart's there.
That's it. So I'm reading the original, and I can see just the dreams being stored, and while you're wide awake, to get to dream. And what hit me was when The Greatest Showman.
Yeah, I never watched that, but I've heard it's good.
And there's just a desire for people that are disenfranchised, that their dreams would come forth. And so the only other thing I say as we get into this conversation is that, on Sundays we would meet as a family son, and we would sit down and we'd talk about, really kind of what we were all about, where we wanted to head the next week. And I've brought it up before, but I remember, when you were little, everybody just agreed, on our vision, values, and we always had somebody to live with us. Generally, we wanted to express, care for somebody, and so we had vehicles to express compassion. That was one of our core values. And I'll never forget this. That one time, Amy Ann opened up and she shared about her vision, and it was just, she's so articulate, and it was really caught us all off guard. It was just really deep. And then she shared about, for us as a family, some of the values and the vehicles, the activities to reach, our vision. And when she got done, we're all stunned. And Taylor says, this is not the family I would have chosen to be a part of.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And she's looking at all of us, and just the only way Taylor could do it, And I think we're all thinking, well, we wouldn't have chose you either, But then she said, but I'm sure glad it happened this way. And I just see our family and even our discussion here, I'm just sure glad it happened this way. And then we'll get to have these conversations, and it means a whole lot. So lead us out. I do not see this on the on my public page. I do see it on the, I don't.
I think it should be streaming to your public page.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. Okay. So you got it. Yeah, good deal. So we're fine.
Yeah. So, okay. So you want to start?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Cool. So we had talked about the last couple of times. The first one we talked just about kind of introduction into who we are, and how your world is one that I kind of grew up in a little bit, but like you're a minister, and typically you've been kind of like the world that you grew up in, or that I grew up in, is more oriented to the right, and is more conservative. And now I'm in a philosophy program out here in Colorado, and a lot of what I do is study ethics. And so my my world is much more on the left, and I feel like what you were kind of expressing earlier just now is that a lot of people are finding that even members of their own family or friends or whatnot, you'll find yourself on different sides of the aisle, or different sides of the Thanksgiving table, where people will often, you're suddenly at you have difference of opinions, whether it's religion, whether it's politics, whether it's about good, right, and wrong. And so we had a question in the stream that we presented last time, or I guess no, it was just on your Facebook page, but just a question about what is the middle, and like, is there middle ground between the left and the right? And I think that one of the things that we should just talk about today is why has it seemed like over the last couple, or the last few years, maybe even decade, it's felt like the left is getting more left and the right is getting more right, and that it's really hard to be in the middle. It's also hard to, at times question, if you're on the left, then you need to always fall in line with the left. If you're on the right, you always need to fall in line with the right. And so, I think that today we'll just talk about why we think that might be, and talk about, ways that it could be a problem and ways that we could solve those problems. Wayne just posted echo chamber of social media. And it's funny because I'm actually writing my thesis paper on echo chambers, and not just in social media, but about how echo chambers reinforce this partisanship, where we're farther and farther becoming, we're losing that middle ground between each other. So do you have any, I have some thoughts, but do you want to pop in with any thoughts you got?
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. I believe it's more than a political, that's all I want to say.
Yeah.
It's a worldview, and it's a worldview. So some people say, look, I'm not political, and no, this is about how we view life, how we view others, how we view what's our greatest priorities, because in this life we have limited resources, energy, and we've got to, be able to see, in our own lives, we need to know. I think it's helpful for everybody. What do we stand for? And not in an obnoxious way, but so I believe that this is a valuable discussion on a level with the Father and the Son, that that's not the only role we have. It's friends. It's, I've always respected your insight, your wisdom, and your leadership, that you've given me leadership in a lot of ways. You're just got a wisdom that helps me. I'm more like a David, that, before you're born, I had that dream that I'm the one who battled and, took territory, and I was a wrestler, and it was a do it wrong harder principle. And it created success, a measure in the environment I was in. But I knew I would need a new operating system when I get older. And, and before you're born, I dreamed about you would come along. They had blonde hair and blue eyes, which you were real blonde haired for a number of years. And
still got the blue eyes, but yeah, the blonde hair is.
The hair is, but it just, I was building something. I wanted you to come along, and you were looking to a city, as and you hadn't been born, and it was just, you had a different way, more like a Solomon or a Jedediah wisdom, which was a peacemaker, and it was profound. And just, you were ready to build a city that was, it had a value system. It was it was, what do I want to say? We've used it before a word, but it was beautiful, and it was efficient, and it had, distinctions where the elderly were cared for in a unique way, and others. And I was to drop what I was doing and come back, and I picked you up over my head because you were little at that time, and I said, I'll build you, I'll listen, and I'll walk into the city with you. And it was really interesting because a couple of years after that, you're out in the backyard, and Amy Ann calls me to look at you and said, look, he's playing with like a pretend bunny, and he's building a blue city. And so to me, this is an awesome reality to understand, not only you as a son, but as a man. And the greatest act of love, I believe, is to listen to somebody's heart and to listen to how you view life and how, I know you enough to know that it's just not reaction to a church system that, was pretty tough to get through sometimes, but it was, you were looking for a better way, and that you still are. And, just with the Ruth question, that I would encourage everybody to read because it's so well written, to say, I'm from Scandinavia and I'm looking at America, and I've always wanted Americans to be able to have a love that's bigger and talk, and now it just is scary. If you guys, and I know Ruth enough to know she helps lead a symphony, and she was just saying the treble's too loud and the bass is too loud, and how do we have a real conversation at this point, but also solutions together. And it was just really good, just because that hasn't been, it feels like, and you'll say it better than me, it feels like outrage has led the day, and it's kind of who's right or wronger room, versus how can we all grow and be better human beings.
Yeah.
And I think that, we're getting some that are really writing some profound comments here, like Michael Densmore and Wayne as it goes on, my brother Jimmy. So I'd just love to hear how you would answer Ruth, and, how you see this. Because I just want to say, I know that some of the people that might come on have read your post, and your post for the audience that we're talking to, and the people has you question the inherency of the scripture. And Paul's writings and his approach towards women, and and we had a little bit more, I think, discussion of the historical context of that, but
sure,
I don't know how much we did or we didn't. But I'm just not afraid of the questions. I think that I would encourage people not to be afraid of, having a good discussion. There's been a number 10, maybe, that senior leaders, well, young but senior in the music industry and stuff in the Christian world, that just renounced their faith because they couldn't find solutions there, and they felt like they were being governed by law, and I don't know if it's a statement against Jesus as much as the whole system. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I think that you're looking at a macro world, and you lived in India, and you had experiences with the Buddhists that were really men and women of peace, and you gained a lot of understanding that mostly as somebody that was 23, that's at that time, just didn't get. And you said, hey, this isn't all bad. This is, and so, I just love for you, like Ruth, to address, because I really trust you, I really respect you, and I really see how you, not this just putting up our dukes, and it's scary. It's scary. I could see, I dreamed about civil war if Trump got elected, because, it just would be too much for some people, and we would, and just, they'd say that's enough, and, and whoever gets elected, we just need a win. on how.
Yeah. During this election, I think that, it could go regardless of who wins or who doesn't win, and even leading up to it. I mean, we certainly are. There's a reason to be a little bit concerned about what's going to happen in the future, and this lack of overlap, this partisanship, or this divide. And like you said, it's not just politics; it involves a lot of things. Like it certainly needs to be addressed, and hopefully, we can find some reconciliation on some issues. And that leads to, I think, what is going to be the central point for what I have today. I mean, there's a few different things that we can talk about, but I do think that what's central to all of this is that the reason why both you and I are kind of looking from different sides, or have different worldview perspectives, but yet we both agree on the fact that this division between the two sides is not healthy. And I think that that's in and of itself an encouraging fact that, there is some agreement on values, and I think a lot of times that's what's dismissed and ignored, or it's hard to find. And we do need each other as a nation, as fathers and sons, as Bob and Jet, on all levels. We need each other, and I think that where this starts, part of the reason that this you and I are even doing this video series, and that hopefully others might be able to identify with this, is because there is that recognition that it's not okay to have a total divide. Certainly there is going to be the case that there always is going to be disagreement, and there's always going to be 2 or 3 or many sides to an issue. But if at least there's an agreement that there is a value to coming together, to trying to find the truth, I think that's a great place to start.
And I agree, and I believe that the first presupposition is that we love one another. I was just brought up in a home where my dad had been an Irish Catholic and had not seen a black person, and so he went to get his blood from the war, and I won't go taken for the war to see. And he passed out, and he was taught that they were evil. And there was a black man trying to help him. And then, it goes on. And so he, in our family, he brought a lot of inner city children because he was an inner city principal. Some that were really rough, like Robert, who tore our pockets off, and he would do other things that were just mean. And, and I asked my dad not to bring Robert out from the inner city. And my dad just kind of looked off in the distance, like, if you'd known what he's gone through, Robert. And he said, there's beauty in there, Bobby. Please just, be patient with me. And, then it was a few days later, I come home and our whole yard's filled with people. And we had a piano by the front door, and I've never heard anybody play like that again. Or after Robert was playing the piano, and it was just, Robert was like one of these, I'm watching these videos on YouTube where a dog's abandoned and scared and it's biting at you. But when you show some love, and he's not an animal, obviously, Robert, but it was just, we loved him and had fun with him and celebrated him. And so I believe the number one premise is that we have appreciation. Love to me is to put worth on somebody else, and it's appreciation, to put value and thanks. And really the Christian faith is based on Thanksgiving, and it's been forgotten and a lot, and we come out with this critical analysis or critique and how people are wrong, and versus the appreciation of their hearts, and maybe ask a deeper question versus our values being threatened. And So, and you're doing the same with me. As you know, I think it's been hard for some in our family or our extended family to look at me and say, "Hey, you're you're part of a community that believes these things." Versus,
Yeah.
saying, "No, I love you. I appreciate you. I'm going to give you. I'm going to hope in you. I'm going to be loyal." And as Jesus, I'm not leaving you. I'm not going nowhere. And so I think that's where I feel like there's a strong foundation that based on love that human beings are worthy of love. Oh,
Yeah.
to love them and to listen to their thoughts and value them and give honor to them. And so I think when we're always looking for what they do wrong or critiquing,
Yeah.
then that's when we're not very desirous as a church or people of faith. And
Yeah.
so, and I think the same for you. I think you're doing something very special and unique because, I think sometimes it's easier just say they're the other side and we're not really for them. We're
Right.
sitting down at a table and having a real conversation. And
Yeah.
so what's happened in your history? Why do you feel the way you feel? And that's what we're doing. So I appreciate you doing that. So.
Well, and I think that when you look at the demographics in the United States, and if you take a person and you're trying to determine whether or not they're Republican or Democrat, we've talked about this before, or we were just talking about it the other day, but the most defined it's just the most defined demographic split is simply just like where people live. It's just geographical as far as, do you live in a rural area or do you live in a suburban or do you live in an urban area or do you live in like a suburban or rural area? Because people who live in low density areas like rural areas and suburban areas generally vote, like most counties too, on a county level. If you look at the counties that vote for Trump in the last election, it's generally low density counties, and ones that voted for Hillary in the last election are generally urban centers. And so I think that something like that, I always try to think of that every single time I'm having a political discussion, because a lot of times it's just about frame of reference. It's about people have different perspectives on things, and whether it's population density or whether it's because you grew up with a different religion, or whether you're different race, or there's different ways in which like people just have different perspectives on things. And so we get really entrenched into this idea that our perspective is representative of the perspective of the whole, and it just isn't true. And this isn't just a critique of one side or the other. I think that if you're not living a life that's similar to these other people, then it's just going to be hard to see it. And so we have to have a sense of empathy. We have to have a sense of attuned listening, where we're really listening to what other people say. And when people are saying that something that they value isn't being had or isn't being realized, we can't be really quick to dismiss them, regardless of difference in political beliefs or religious beliefs.
I concur. I concur. I think that there is, I found this distinction is that when I was, like I'll just use my experience in the church, but other leadership roles. I was in a leadership role in my university.
Mm-hmm.
I was over the Supreme Court, and then I helped run a Senate campaign, Ron Freeman's. And Newt Gingrich would come out and we would meet with him. I found that my discussions were, that it was it was awesome to get around the table
Mm-hmm.
and have 6 people. You know, we used to have these dinners for 6, and we can
Mm-hmm.
talk about that to solve the divide. You
Yeah.
know, one of the ways to solve the divide, to have
Yeah.
somebody that was Indian, somebody that was from a black, somebody was, and just hear their upbringing and why they believe what they believe. And,
Yeah.
and you know, it led to some tremendous compassion and understanding. I found when I was in the midst of, you know, helping run a campaign, that the strength and the assertiveness that I would have would change because the consequences were greater. And so I believe that, you know, that there is an ability for you as and I, as father son, to talk, but also as those that are looking at the implications of decisions and saying to a broader audience, you know, if we decide A, can it lead to B? You know, and what's B look like?
Yeah.
You know, 5 to 10 years from now.
Yeah.
And that's where I'll feel a responsibility.
Yeah.
Is to, and that's where I want to be real honest.
Yeah.
In our discussion and say, hey, I, you know, love you, and but I'm gonna be me. I'm gonna share openly what I feel, and you're gonna share openly what you feel.
Yeah, well, so that's what when I was even just originally thinking about having this conversation and this discussion, you know, I think that there is a lot of people will be talking about middle ground as like, well, we should just land in the middle on all of these issues, and that's not necessarily what I'm, or I think what you're advocating for, because it's not just like the law of aggregation or the where it's just you're over here, I'm over here, so truth must be in the middle. I don't think either of us have views of truth like that. But what I think that it is that I can be fight for the things that I believe in, and that I can push for, you know, not for something in the middle, but just push for what my convictions are truth of. But it's about meeting in the middle to listen to the other person and hear what they have to say. So I think that that's, you know, I get the picture of like, and this might bother some people, and I apologize if it's a poor analogy, but you know, I think of some of the people who were the strongest in their faith, you know, the Lauren Cunninghams or something, you know, like people who I met who just were unflinching, unwavering in their faith, but yet they were so comfortable talking and accepting people who were radically different faiths, you know, and able to accept and appreciate them for who they were, without having to compromise on their versions of truth. It's not like, you know, if you have someone who's a Buddhist and someone who's a Christian, you should meet in the middle and have form some Christian Buddhism hybrid. Like, you know, truth can still, it still ought to be fought for, but it's this method of fighting for truth where we have a willingness to really hear, to listen, to have good faith conversations where you're listening to the other person to hear what they have to say. Because oftentimes the biggest problem in these divides is that we just get so disconnected that we don't understand the other side in the least bit, you know. And I've seen both sides of it, because growing up as, you know, a conservative Christian, or growing up in that world, I remember so many times where it felt like, whether it was media or whether it was politics, it felt like people just totally misrepresented a lot of Christianity. And I was like, this isn't what, you know, like, we're not, you know, made it very dry, made it very, you know, weird and religious. And certainly there were some critiques of Christianity that were true, but like, it just felt like, you know, you felt misunderstood. You felt like this isn't really what Christianity is about. And then as growing older, you know, I'll look back, and whether it's Facebook posts or whether it's having conversations, you know, you hear what conservatives think about liberal ideology. And so, again, some critiques are really right on, and some values, are accurate, but a lot of times it feels like, I think you're missing the point of what the conversation is. Like, I feel like that's a total misrepresentation. And so I'm not saying that if we have these conversations, if we have honest dialogues, that it always will lead to this middle ground where we agree on something, but at the very least, it will give this sense of humanity and camaraderie where it's like, well, we're trying to make this world a better place. We're trying to make the United States a better place. And I think that first step, I think, is just something, it sounds a little easy, but it clearly isn't. Like, it clearly is not something that's been done near enough in our system right now.
It's excellent. Yes. And it's so wonderful when it is,
Right. Yeah.
And I think that we didn't, I don't know how much we talked about it, but, my mom and dad were ones that came out of a real strict Catholic background.
Right.
But their whole worldview was, just that one particular part of the population was valuable, white Irish Catholics and Italian Catholics, and they wouldn't have said that, but that's just the facts,
Yeah.
But then, my dad had a great awakening by, just being in the war, being a machine gunner, and being saved by a couple of Polish men, and then other experiences where it showed beyond their external flesh, and showed their hearts, and so he started questioning some of his religious upbringing that had, I wouldn't say it was the core of the faith, probably, but it was our Monsignor that just had bad experiences with other people groups, so he would not allow them to come to our church.
Yeah.
My parents stepped out, and they started a group called Community One, and they met in Luce Park, and it welcomed people in.
Yeah.
Like you said, it wasn't about we agree or we don't agree. It's that you're a valuable human being, and you've had a real life experience, and maybe with some, they had some beautiful understanding that we could all grow by, because there is that where it's just, wow, we've been protecting this clay pot of values that needs to be broke. And there's a beautiful diamond in there,
Yeah. Yeah.
But there was also those that had just been, they're speaking out of their hurt and their rejection, and they're trying to create policies out of their pain. And that's not going to necessarily be the best long-term solution out of, reacting to others out of hurt, and let's help heal the hurt, but let's not design a policy that's just going to be one that, it's going to end up flipping on each other. When the other party comes back and the other party comes back, so that I was so proud of my parents to help lead Community One. And I was so proud of them in our neighborhood that had been, like I said, I raised my voice. I didn't mean to do that.
No, you're good.
Yeah, I was just getting fired up.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I'll just turn my audio down. Just kidding.
Just kidding. Pump that up. But the Irish Italian Catholic, there was such love, and I knew what a real neighborhood was. And Bobby Hartley wasn't just Ann and Jack's Hartley's son.
Yeah.
I was loved by, and I was fought for, and when I was a lifeguard and a little boy drowned, it was Doe Thomas, our next neighbor, that store neighbor, that said, he's not a bad kid. He didn't mean to let this boy drown. And I'll never forget that, growing up in a rural neighborhood. But then when we wanted to include others, they thought it was real if we listened. At first, we just did the fair housing. It's just wrong to not allow blacks in. You know,
Right.
just wrong, you know, to just because you know, people looked at them as particular way, and it's just not true. There's a lot of people that have awesome value. So anyhow, but to sit down, we made a choice to sit down and listen to the years and the experiences, and some of them had real experiences with other people groups, not necessarily blacks, but there was also this sense of utopia that we had really had a community. You know, we would all meet in lawn chairs and we would enjoy the company. And why disrupt that? That was our nucleus family. Don't bring them into this area. Let's invite them into other settings. But we were just getting our stuff together on our own. Steve Fick and others were wonderful, but they're starting to have trouble, you know, and we're a community. And so that it was really awesome to come together and hear our neighborhood talk about the whys, you know, because it was bigger than that. They want to care for Kevin O'Hara, Casey O'Hara, that alcohol is coming into our neighborhood, these things. And so they just said, we don't have the resources to invite another group in. And it wasn't all that they were evil, but my parents were able to convince them that there's enough love to go around, and also that maybe they'll be helpful. And that's exactly what that happened. But without that discussion and those discussions, there would have been alienation and broken relationships. And relationships are broken so quickly today. I mean, they say the length of a relationship is 3 months with a young man, a young woman. That, I mean, a sincere relationship, or even some friendships. It says that they're shortened. And, you know, that's not long enough to know whether they like pizza or they like spaghetti. You know, it's just relationships more important than that. And love's more important than that. And I think, you know, what Ruth is bringing up and what we're bringing up is the frailty of relationships between when we perceive that somebody doesn't think the way we think, then they got to be evil. And nobody's asked a question. Nobody's said, why do you feel that way? And what's happened in your life? And I feel like for single moms, and I feel for divorced people, I feel like, you know, and I had talked to a pastor, and he said, you know, as a seasoned leader, and he said, 45 years, I've never talked about divorce, even though 50 that. You know? And there's 17, 20, there can be layers of reasons for why that happens. And it's not the scarlet A, it's how do we redeem and restore, and how do we be able to speak into people versus all of a sudden we just stamp them as useless.
Right.
And that's very upsetting to me because I just want to say this about the left. You know, I was brought up in a way that we valued certain things. You know, and even though we had a hard religious upbringing, you know, we got freer to see what I believe is more the true expression of Jesus, you know. But we had a Jewish man that would come to our house, and my dad was very good in chess, so he played my dad in chess, and he had 2 or 3 divorces. And he was just hard to get along with. Murray Milliker. He was intelligent, but he was a wonderful man. Wonderful man. I mean, he'd bring us the best Christmas gifts that were from the heart and write us poems. But even then, I had this desire for Jesus. I just thought he was, and he would speak about him in a way that he wrote this long poem that Little League Baseball and the saluting the American flag that makes you real Christians. And it was, you know, a satire.
Right.
He had a lot to say, but he had a lot that was mixed with this pain. And I can remember how my dad said, if you just wait a little longer, you know, my dad's statement was always, there's gold in there. You just wait a little longer in patience. And so Murray Milliker on a Christmas time, he brought us all gifts, and then he had up in the tree, and he wanted us to read it. And I had this happen with my grandmother as well. It was profound. He had just seen us as a family, convey love to him through a tough divorce with Betty Milliker, and they ended up best friends and would come to our house. Which was stunning for me that level of conflict could be restored. And he had written up, his gift to us was, I see and I believe. And there was just a beauty, not that he was in agreement,
right?
But he just put down his dukes.
Yeah.
And he found a place where he was accepted and was valued and loved. And if we can create that in the world, and you and I create that, and others create that, and our little part, then it's not gonna. There's smaller issues.
Yeah.
About who's right or wrong about certain things. If we can't create this atmosphere that we respect one another and that I'm gonna love you to the end.
Yeah.
Then I'm concerned about a world where that's not.
That. Well, let me ask you this. So, just like in a specific way, I mean, if you don't want to answer, you don't have to. But where do you, as someone who is, I don't know if you would call yourself evangelical or charismatic or non-denominational, but there was a post earlier that be careful not to conflate Christianity with conservatism. And I don't mean to do that when I'm saying that they're obviously Christianity and conservatism is very different things. And even people who are evangelical doesn't mean that they're necessarily conservative. So I want to be careful with my rhetoric there. But as someone who is in a community that's more right, that's more conservative in their religion.
But are you reading some of these comments?
I've been trying to. Your brother's been saying good ones.
Mary Magdalene and James Cardell. I just.
It's good.
That's Tommy Bachhaus and Jimmy, my brother. The fair housing about Betty Milliker, and it's also the Jewish thing to do.
Yeah, that was a good one.
They're brilliant. Yeah, there's been brilliant people that have come along, through the ages, and I just love the identification. I wish I could get all the comments up there at the same time. So, but I think we might, later respond to comments.
That one was.
Sorry. Because there's been brilliant people that have come along. I like listening to myself.
I know you do.
You nailed it. But so this might be some more of the comments so I can see it. But
wait, I had
what was your question?
Well, so originally there was a statement that I do want to make sure that it's clear that I do not think that all Christians are conservatives and all conservatives are Christians. It certainly is not the case. So I'll be clear about that rhetoric. But when you are talking though about feeling, this feeling of alienation, I know as someone who leans more left has felt the inverse, like felt a little alienated from the community that I grew up and but
that's a great point.
In what ways do you feel like there's alienation towards that? Because that's something as someone who's on the, I ask because of, if there's feelings of alienation, then that needs to be fixed,
That's right. So, and the question is, if you stepped outside and you got some views that are like your views, where you're, environmental philosophy, and I just remember you having a discussion with somebody about fracking,
Yeah.
And it seems to have more religious connotations, where it's and then you get. But I think the statements you made about Paul was kind of the first time I saw a firestorm come your way.
Yeah.
You just challenge something that was, and
Yeah.
I know you enough to know you're going to ask a question. And
Yeah.
you're going to say it, where it's not always a conclusion, but it sounds like a conclusion. Like you felt like that statement was not a good statement. And, we talked about it, and I talked about what I believe the context was and the heart of it was.
Yeah.
More, and you were on top of it. You're smart. You've been in this world for a long time, the Christian world. But to answer the question about, I love you bringing that up. I love you bringing that up because I think that's happened with you. I think it's happened. I just saw the answers with some of my friends or people I know that just ripped your head off, And I thought we got to be a little bit more confident. One, in our love for you, and then our love for confident in our value system that we're not misogynistic, or if we have been, we've wrongly interpreted the value of a woman according to God's sight, and that there's some points to be made there. And but I just love you bringing it up because I think that with others they'll just step aside and feel that alienation and just you've shown real courage to say that's a lot of people I love and I'm not just going to give up on a relationship with them. I would say it's people that are surprising themselves in a good way. By that, they're reacting and then they're stepping back and they're saying, now I'm reacting and I don't know if, and I'm just going to say not to you, but Bob Fraser's been a man that's a close friend, but very strong, but as intellectual, but he just wrote today something that was profound about understanding a bigger worldview and accepting more people through this time and hour. And not that he did before, but the rhetoric with him and his dad just died, and his brothers was always really, they went at each other.
Right.
And so to see him understand, it was tough on me because I believe that we haven't treated, as believers, haven't treated others as their, once they make a mistake in a certain area, or we see they believe something, we think well, then they are excommunicated, and I would say that's really tragic. And I'm pretty fired up about it. And I think Tommy's written in here a few times. Podcast is one of the best hearts I've ever seen. But like David, that David did things that were. Tommy's a passionate guy. He'll make some mistakes here and there. But is his heart not always loved Jesus uniquely? And I'm not trying to point that out about Tommy right now. At all. But I've just seen him
feel that alienation.
Oh yeah. Now sometimes I think you have to draw boundaries. I'm not talking about Tommy, but if somebody's, getting into some things that that aren't healthy to be around, then you love them, but you don't participate with that. I've had that when I, own the cleaning company. Some of the people that were love the Lord, but then they got into stealing and even activity and stuff. And they were, I just had to build a boundary for the sake of the whole company. And I had one that got into watching he'd go flash kids. And
Oh, wow.
yeah. And I loved him. I loved him, and I wanted to see him make it. He had been in jail 16 times beforehand, and then he had really gotten touched, and but then, it happened, and it's a hard thing to break, but I visited him, and so I don't want to get off the subject, but
yeah. Well, I have a thought here, just from what I'm hearing you say, and I just think that there's even the worst offenses that people do, we have a real tendency to label people as their worst offense, and I get why, like, a lot of, I'm always torn when it comes to like the issues of race in the United States. Obviously, I've expressed this to you several times. Like that is a big thing for me. Like, I want to see, equality and justice, and think that, the United States has had a lot of problems when it comes to treating people with, different non-white skin color, but I do understand the danger to having rhetoric where you're labeling someone racist, because I think there's plenty. I think racism is a behavior. It's when you do something and you act a certain way against, you have a particular prejudice, that's obviously unacceptable. Like, it's something that, if I was in a situation where I, was at work or something like that, and someone was being overtly racist, there's no way I would, excuse that. Like, that's clearly like a behavior that is really wrong. But when you label someone a racist, then they are that. There's no capacity for change. There's no way to believe that this person couldn't get better. And so I see a lot of people on the right being like, well, I'm not racist, of course, because there's this defense that once you get called racist, that's just who you are, and you can't change it. And and for a lot of people, it's like, well, I try really hard to not be like, I try really hard to be kind to everyone that I interact with. And I honestly, from my perspective, don't see treating people differently because of skin color, so that now that you're just, because I'm a Republican, you're calling me racist. I get, like, that's an exclusionary and alienating means of conversation. And I think there are really coherent conversations to be had about systemic racism and the way that we can perpetuate, racial injustice without knowing it. And I think that those are really important conversations to have. But I think at the beginning, it's even hard to have that conversation with most people now, because they, if someone's on the right, then they've spent a lot of time trying to defend themselves from this idea that they're racist. So it's like, now it's not even a conversation that we can really have without all your defenses naturally going up. And so, yeah, that's why I think that, like, alienation is just, we can't do it, and one other thought that I have, and I'll let you jump in here. I don't mean to monopolize the conversation here, but like, I remember growing up, there was I can't remember even what his name is now, but there was a young adult, like when I was in junior high, there was like a high school student that was kind of in our community who had gone off to college, and he had posted something on Facebook, or maybe it was even before Facebook, but there was, some recognition that he was no longer Christian. He had rejected Christianity and had accepted a much more liberal ideology. And I remember as a kid just being so like, oh, well, the devil got him. And so like, well, he's lost, this idea of like, just this sense of outgroup thing. And I didn't even know. And it's always been terrifying to me, because I think back on that all the time. I think back at what 11-year-old Jed thought about, this young man who had stepped outside of my ideological circle. And as I'm now agnostic and am no, don't consider myself a Christian anymore, and am outside of the boundaries of, the ideology that I had once grown up in, it's just terrifying to think of, well, all of those friends and those people who I was once close with are now viewing me in the same way that I viewed that man, like where it's just when you step outside, you're suddenly lost to the world and stuff. And so I do think that, I will say that since then, growing up, and I think that I've been very impressed that there have been many people, like I haven't been completely alienated from the world that I grew up with, that most people still want to connect, and most people still want to, I have my friends like Andrew Butler, a good friend who's in the first chapter of the book that, we wrote. And yeah, that one. Yeah. And he's
it's on Amazon.
he's a Christian lawyer, and one of my best friends, and still is my best friend, still is. And we've had many conversations about faith, and it was hard for him when I was like, hey, don't think I'm a Christian anymore. Like, that was a hard conversation to have, and he was honest with me, but the love and the understanding way outweighed, this ideological identification where it needs to be me versus you sort of thing. And so it definitely doesn't need to always be like that. But that's why I think that alienation is like one of the biggest things that we have to fight against right now.
Yeah, I think the recognition that the United States has it was Judeo-Christian.
Right.
And I like that. I like a lot of that. I think there's some religious understandings and laws and rules that come with it. Like there's 613 rules, and plus the 10 Commandments. And it's not necessarily love God, love others. That's
right.
Your spiritual ways. But anyhow, but our nation has included a lot of other people. And if we're including them, then there's value to them, and there's value to understanding, some things that maybe they even do better, and they, respond better. So, so I like what you said. There was something that before when you began to speak that just, got me a little fired up just about how, I feel like the community that when we're talking about finding middle ground,
mm-hmm.
I feel like for some reason that a lot of the Christian world that I've been around, that it's been important to be right, and it's important that, the guy gets shot 7 times in the back, and we got to say, well, he was on drugs, he was going for a weapon, and I just look at it and I think, nah, that was unnecessary.
Yeah.
And so,
well, I honestly, I appreciate even that sentiment. Even if we disagree about what is necessary about police reform or something like that, and we could be totally different in opinion on that. It's amazing how much it just really feels difficult and kind of scary when there's times where someone gets shot 7 times and the immediate response is to try to make it that's a problem. That's, and to feel like there's a sense that we can at least recognize that that's an issue, and it's something we don't want to see.
It's an issue. I can see policemen that have had difficult behaviors because those 2 guys look scared. And it could be post-traumatic syndrome. It could be.
Yeah.
But the event itself was there's a guy walking in front of. You had lots of opportunities.
Yeah.
you know, and if you're like, you know, my brother Jimmy, you know, who's been trained,
Yeah.
with third world and karate, and you know, he could have the incapacitated guy just without hurting him, you know, and they have a, you know, it's out on YouTube. It's called well, I don't want to say the name of it, but it's a real reasonable guy, and he's talking about the laws, and he takes, you know, different events where they've been shot, people have been shot, and he calls it the room temperature challenge. Also, often that means they've been killed, you know.
Oh, okay.
So somebody comes into a grocery store and they're trying to rob, and you never know why. You know, they could legitimately be hungry, and they got a knife, or they put in their finger in their coat like they got a gun, or they have a gun, you know. But I've seen ones that have a gun and have somebody shoot at them, and they're gone. You know, they just didn't want to get into all that. They just wanted to get some money to get some things done. And, you know, I had enough history in the inner city with being with my dad, with people that were really desperate to feed their children. And, you know, we could say, well, they created their own circumstances, all that. You know, I just was there enough to know that's just not right. You know, that's not, you know, your system was not set up for you to succeed as well, you know. And so it was a remarkable person, and I don't know if remarkable, but resilient, that really came out of that setting. But but they'll take off, and they're no threat. They're running away, and they're getting shot, and they get shot in the back, you know. And then he says they took the room temperature challenge, which means they died. And I mean, something explodes in me about the value. Who was this person? And they have children, and did they have a record, or did they have something where they just snapped and they felt like they had to do this? I mean, it's worthy for a human being's life to ask those questions. And I love, like, the judge in Providence. There's a few of them that will find out, why did you do this? And there was Charles Daly, I believe, he was a Chicago mayor. And you go back in the age of rhetoric and how people have been changed. Here you have the mayor of Chicago, and the mayor has a right to sit on the bench and judge affairs. So he would go to, it was called like Beggar's Court, and it was where people had done something like stole at a grocery store or something like that. And they just, you know, would say, here's the law, you're in jail for 10 days or 30 days, and you have to do this, that. Something that we're able to do, and you can see in their eyes that they had value. They're really, you know, just at the end of the rope. And so I remember one time Charles Daly, he said he found out a man had stolen bread for his family. And so, you know, you know, you can't justify stealing. You can't justify those things, but he was desperate and he did it. And Charles Daly had the whole courtroom stand up and just said, now, we're responsible that we have a man like this in our city. And I just cried, you know, and everybody gave him $1 or $2, you know, and he changed forever. And I think those are ways to change human beings. And to me, that's more like what Jesus would do. And I think that what I've seen in your life is, you know, coming out of some religious things and coming into, I've said this to you, I said, you get more like Jesus a lot. You know, that's what Jesus would do. And, you know, it's just, I think we got a great opportunity in this conversation to see what would really make a difference for a nation that's could be headed towards some real unnecessary calamity. And I do believe that, you know, just as we begin to talk about solutions, you know, that, you I do believe there's outside forces that are trying to get us. I remember I had a dream years ago about Red Dawn, and that movie was where these Russian paratroopers came in.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah. Oh, but the audience, I guess we're not just talking to each other.
Yeah. Shooting on high school kids, and then they learn how to. And, I just had, like, with this event with, I'm not going to name the event, but where a gang got to a policeman and said, look, we're going to take your family out if you don't shoot somebody, a black person. And I've been enough in the inner workings of things.
Yeah.
And I'll just back up and say, from 15 to 18, I dealt drugs, and I had an individual where he owned an apartment complex. He's 23, and he's got this Corvette, he's a black belt, and he said, look, you can buy your Thai stick from me. Now, this is old, but he said $900, and and I was distributing at that time. I'm not proud of it. But he said, I heard you're good at arm wrestling. I'll arm wrestle you for it. And so there's a group around, and he's just a real serious, intense guy. And I said, sure. So I arm wrestled him, and he got madder and madder. He kept wanting to arm wrestle me, and I kept beating him, because it was a collegiate champion. I just knew how to do it,
Yeah.
So I get back to Kansas City, and it's not but a few days. He lived out in Lawrence, and two guys show up, and they say, either you're going to pay double or you're going to hurt somebody for him. And
what? Oh, wow.
And I was scared because you just looked in his eyes and you could tell he meant business. And at that point I was able to say, I'm not doing either.
Yeah.
We're right out there with a couple of guys that had watched it, and they said, hey, he legitimately won. And so the guy backed off. But, I think that there's other forces that do want to. I'm not saying that's a majority, but I think that as a nation, we're able to pull together and we're able to say, okay, maybe there is a nation or two that doesn't want us to succeed. Maybe there's a gang from Central America that wants to bring, those things happen. And so it could be that a shooting happens and I'm not saying that it might just not be a policeman. It might be that it's, that the other things have happened. And I'm just not talking movie stuff, but it also will be PTSD or whatever it is. I saw a woman policeman that I've never heard anybody more terrified in my life. It was a dark street out in the woods, and she came up on it, and she just asked the man what's going on. He pulled a gun, he shot it, and went across her head, and she's trying to hold the gun, and she's begging for her life, and her backup shows up, and she's able to disarm the guy. But
and she had PTSD after that, you said?
Yeah, and I wouldn't want her on a call after that. She's gonna call.
Yeah.
And so I think that these are, and then we weren't necessarily going to get into the police tonight because we're talking about how to build bridge, or just understand a middle ground. And what you were talking about, you've never said to me, and it's been years. Like, I remember the time where, a friend of mine told you to take your hat off, and you're suffering. And you laugh, I cry because you had a big hole because of the.
I had just like an open wound on my head. It's an autoimmune thing, but
Extamsa, or not extamsa, but
well, it's not but I don't know if we need to get into my specific medical history, but
right. But I mean,
yeah, there was an because of an autoimmune issue that I still have. I had like just an open sore on my head, lost a lot of hair, and it's gotten way better since then. So I had a hat on, and we went into a gentleman's house, and he was lecturing.
Disrespectful and dishonoring, and take your hat off in his house, and I knew you wouldn't make a big point about it one way or the other. You'd take your hat off, but I noticed that that wasn't. You just kind of went on, and we had the conversation with him, and then it was a long time after that you let me know, and I just thought it was painful looking, and I can remember just thinking, man, a lack of understanding and the assumption. But what you just said about, just when you started to explore other ideas and, you feel, I mean, it's, you felt not part of a community that you've been a part of for a lot of years. And just the way that you have, I didn't know you were paying them, and you're not. You didn't act like you were paying them, but you're not acting like you are now. But I just, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot, and I think that that's, I think that what sticks with me aren't the moments of feeling this sense of alienation or feeling like an outcast. I think it's more what sticks with me are the moments where people actively fought against that. I think that even before we started this video series, like there was, this wasn't that long ago. It was about 9 months ago or something. Well, I'm working on my final paper for my first semester in my grad school, and I come back. I'm in Kansas City for a short time, and I'm spending most of the day working on it. I have to finish it by the end of the day. You pick me up with a friend of yours, and he's a fine guy and everything. He's gonna be the bad guy in this story, but that's but because he picked us up, and he doesn't believe the same things that I do. Doesn't believe. I think it was particularly just didn't believe that climate change was real, and people have different perspectives on it. And I'm not, I'm in environmental ethics. I obviously do think that it's a real present issue, but I'm writing my final paper, and he just crossed the line on a few things, just insulting people, and I'm there trying to kind of defend it. I don't really care what he thinks or what he has to say, but like I not that I like don't care about him, but just like it wasn't. He was obviously coming pretty hard against the very thing that I'm like actively trying to work on right in this time, and so we're driving in the car, and he goes off for a little bit. I get a little heated, and I'm about to defend myself, and you jump in before, and you just are like, this isn't okay. This isn't like how we talk to people. This isn't how, and you're just wrong. I think you said on something, and obviously you're not. You don't believe all of the things that I certainly think that we would be sympathetic in some of those things. We've talked about animal ethics before and stuff, but you just to have you like speak up against this and defend me, even though we don't have the same ideology, and you're my dad, of course, like there's some of that in there too, but that meant a lot to me, and it feels like I feel like that's something I wish we saw a little bit more on both sides of, like, when someone on the left crosses the line and starts insulting people. I want it to be my job to make sure that that's not the thing. Like, people don't feel comfortable doing that, and I feel like we get so focused on reading about and the extreme cases of the other side. So if you're on the right, you're going to see all the Facebook posts in the world about Antifa and these different things and rioters and whatever it is, and then if you're on the left, you're going to see everything about, fascists and right wing and, QAnon and all, and whatever. Like, we don't have to, I don't mean to like bring up specifics, but just in general, where you'll see that. And it's so hard because we find everything that's wrong with the other group, but we never, it's the whole, you have a speck in your brother's eye, but a log in your own. Like, we just don't even look at our own community and like the ways in which our own community is violating, being, just violating good faith, violating these standards of, and sometimes even like violating, like in extreme cases, just being, totally unacceptable or violent or whatnot. And so to see, I think it would encourage me so much to see people on the right stand up against your own group and be like, this is just not acceptable. We're always going to fight for truth. We're always going to fight for goodness. And this rhetoric is just not okay. And on the same with the left, I'd feel way more encouraged if you just saw more like being like, hey guys, we got to do better than this. And I think we see it a little bit, but anyway.
No, I'm looking at the comments, that are awesome that I'm hearing you. Yeah, I definitely, like the Republican National Convention, or the Democratic.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
What I would hear before was we all agreed that, like somebody shot 7 times in the back, whether it's drug addict, this or that, there's ways to, not paralyze somebody for their whole life, or, the little white boy that was shot in the head.
Yeah.
That compassion, I just thought, okay, we're trying to, the left is trying to say we're going to be progressive and be inclusive of all groups, and we're going to make sure that they're cared for, the ones that have been marginalized. And, and I have a relationship which I've had for 30 years with David Alshul, who is ministry on 31st Truths, and identifies with the left in areas of compassion for the disenfranchised.
Yeah.
He's gotten a disillusioned of measure because he feels like it's a policy as much as it's not as much a practice on certain ways.
Yeah, I think that's a totally fair. A lot of what I do is some of that too. Is like I think that, while I obviously lean very far left, like I do get worried about like, hey, is this just policy or is this practice? Are we living this? Like, if we feel these things, what individually, what are we doing about it? Like, are we going to soup kitchens? Are we, I do think that a lot of people on the left are really great on that. Like, I've found some incredibly compassionate people, like the prison outreach that we did at UMKC, and just like seeing people really caring for the disenfranchised and working really hard at their own expense for it. But yeah, and that's what a lot of people hate about politics too, is just like, it feels like it takes all the compassion out, just makes it about policy, and then we're arguing about policy and not about compassion. And I think that's a really fair critique of both sides.
Yeah, and I saw, that the law and order was really the emphasis, and that's what the right had showed. And I'm not saying there wasn't compassion showed on both sides. It just was they were going to balance each other out. We're going to agree on some things that were just common sense. And so I think that, the interesting thing for me, I don't know how it's happened, is that I do have a communication channel to certain individuals, you know, and for like Trump, I sent 3 schools that wrote, and they're 6-year-olds to 12-year-olds that wrote prayers for him, but also made statements that were, you know, just they were stunning, you know, just about him being more patriarchal, but they didn't say it. And patriarchal in this way, just being caring for, you know, every people group and not being exclusive but inclusive.
Yeah.
But with balance, there was 3 things that the children really encouraged. It was profound. Was just our economic system wasn't about we win and they lose. Now there are some injustices. I've done enough international, you know, I did some, you know, just exporting, importing with Zimbabwe, and you know, there's an equity that needs to be worked out. And so, but the point is that he listened, you know, I mean, to certain things where he brought him up in his campaign. Senator that I sent him through, he talked to. And so, you know, I just think when he gets punched in the face by, he's a human being, and I have purpose for whoever is in office. That's a hard job. And I'm
for sure. Yeah.
And, you know, so I think that, you know, we're both in a position, and I'm going to have a discussion with some people tomorrow that are leaders that are, you know, fighting for Senate seats, or there's Kevin McCarthy, who's, you know, the majority leader, minority leader, and you know, I'm just finding that there's an openness to not just a party line, but to, you know, this is what my hope is, and I'm seeing some, is that, you know, that we're looking at 5, 10, 15, 20 years out. I don't know how I got into this political realm, but with some of the different nations too, you know.
Yeah.
I've just been dealing with, you know, health, as you know, that I haven't, you know, as much, you know, talked to the leaders the way I have in the past. But, you know, if people think that leaders, like, you know, discussions that I had for just a short time with George Bush, you know, how to pray, and, you know, that people come up, well, he's part of the Illuminati, or he's part of Masons, and you know, that sometimes it's not my question. You know, it's not my question. I mean, if everybody went back through my history and some, you know, like the fraternity vows I took, when I look back on them, they're blood curdling, some of them. But I didn't even know what I was saying while I was saying it.
Right.
Anything to do with it since then. And so I'm not saying that's with him, or, you know, the demonizing of our leaders versus, you know, it's not an easy job. I don't know who would want to be a leader, you know?
Yeah. No, I mean, I empathize with that. I think that, I don't know. It's hard for me because I do feel like a lot of leaders just need to have a higher level of criticism than like if you are in a leadership position. I think that subjects you to a higher degree of accountability. And so I would say that there's a problem of just demonizing people in general, not just in particular leaders. But I don't want to mischaracterize your argument like that.
And that's something maybe we could talk about some other time again, because I would say everybody needs cupbearers. And cupbearers aren't yes men or women. It's like Kevin with me. He'll disagree with me, but I know he believes in me. It's for me.
Yeah, you need. Yeah. And I get that. I think that maybe that's a conversation that we have at a different time, because I'd be interested in hearing what you think. I definitely lean towards being pretty, like I think that, people in leadership do have a lot of degrees of accountability that the rest of us don't, or just like different, different measure, not different, difference in kind, but different in degree. But I get what you're saying. I think that it would be an interesting conversation. I'd be open to hearing what you would say about that too. And I know that you've probably felt more of that leadership responsibility than I have in my life and stuff. And so that should be a good one.
Be a great conversation, because I think it'd be a great conversation, because I did get criticized and critiqued, and sometimes it was real.
Yeah, and
sometimes it wasn't.
And sometimes people are just gunning for you, and I get that. I think that
And so I look at, and I'm going from 1 Thessalonians, where it says, pray for your leaders all the time. And it was just a appeal that they're in a unique place of, warfare. It's difficult. Like when I sat in Zimbabwe, I would go out early in the morning, about 5 a.m. to have a devotion time. And I'd go by a tree. Well, I didn't realize it was a tree where the chief sat, who would talk to the different tribes about their disputes with one another. And the disputes were life and death in some situations, very difficult.
Yeah.
He had the most peaceful spirit, and he'd come out and just meditate. And I'm not sure, where his meditation was, what it was about, or, I just honored his space. But I saw this ability to, like Solomon, to make complicated matters simple, in the sense where there'd be a solution and hope, and everybody would agree.
Yeah.
And I had never seen anything like that. It was just awesome. But I'd be behind him, praying for him. I'd have to go to my own responsibilities after a while. But I noticed 2 or 3 other men and women that were just kind of there to support him. And after he had a real tough situation that just depleted him, then they would talk to him, and they would help him get his head back in the game, or comfort him, because I've just seen that they're human beings. Like when the discussion with George Bush was, during the time that Cindy Sheehan, her son, got killed in Iraq, and she was out, out at the farm, or his ranch. I'm sorry. And she could get within 100 feet or 100 yards. I can't remember.
Yeah. She
brought a group of people, and they were on the megaphones, and I could hear them as I was talking to him through a laptop. And I said, "You're rubbing your horse," but But the point was that I heard her voice, and I said, "Is it tough?" And he said, "I didn't want, her son to die." I mean, it was just really tender. I can't talk publicly about it. And, he wasn't the only one making those decisions, and he deferred to people, and, and he wasn't going to put the blame on anybody. But, I just saw that if we helped him more than we hurt him, it might be true. He's responsible. But at the same time, I want leaders to succeed. I want them to get more of a heart. I don't want them to get tough. And that's where I feel like Trump has learned how to get alienated and tough. And I think that is, I've seen other sides, because I know people that did business with him, and I'm not going to get into that right now. But, I just think that there's more to, they're human beings. Yeah. And I do think that the critique is that when their actions touch a lot of people,
Yeah.
You're going to say yay or nay.
Yeah.
But you don't have to demonize the person unless their rhetoric is not necessarily to show better choice of words and language. I think there's, like in Europe, or not England, there's a school, and Eton School, and it trains people how to be kings and queens diplomatic.
Oh, right.
It's not a style. It's understanding people's hearts and speaking to them in a way that doesn't necessarily punch them in the face.
Right.
Tell them you're nothing, you're worthless, you're a scandal, and so.
Yeah. Well, I think that this is, I'm writing down stuff to talk about for the next time, because I think we've had a very fruitful, productive conversation so far. And so I think we should, we're lead into the next, take a 9-hour nap. But I think that there's questions of, how do we keep people accountable to certain standards? What standards should we have? Because it's interesting too, because like there's conversations about being politically correct, and a lot of people liked Trump because he wasn't politically correct. But it's hard for me sometimes, because I'm like, well, there's reasons why, there's reasons of policy where it's like, if you alienate these people, you make fun of them, you shouldn't do that, because you represent that group of people. And so I think it's a more nuanced conversation. But I'd be really interested in exploring it next time. So do you mind if we close for the night?
I'm ready. And there's some amazing comments. I think we review those, and Paul Hensley, I'm reading Paul's is. So I think that we can just, regather our thoughts and do,
Sounds great.
I love you, son. I love the conversation. I think that, we're heading in a good direction, and it's helpful. And, I don't want to leave the feeling that, I'm not anti our leader. I'm not I'm anti I'm not in agreement with some actions. I got to look at policies, and I got to look at what really has helped the American people. But I also got to look at how it's done. It's not only what it's done, but it's my dad. He was more concerned not what he got accomplished, but how he got it accomplished. Noble man devise noble plans, but noble plans they stand. And so there's a way to do things that just, you can get a lot done by just having some values that we all agree on. That, so the one thing that was real positive, is just, I talked about to different leaders, that they'd say they love everybody. And I'd say, no, you don't love everybody. Because when you talk like that, then you dismiss a person, and love is to appreciate.
Right. Yeah.
Love has action. It's to appreciate.
Yeah.
And so I love to find in the scripture, it says that Esau hated his birthright because he had no regard for it. So just say somebody's a loser and they're worthless, then that you can't say that you love them. It's an oxymoron. You got to appreciate. But then I see, on both sides, I see just a value, and that's what I want to leave the discussion with, and that we, just the value of a human being in God's sight.
Yeah.
It's just extraordinary, and for us to be able to give a flower to one and a garden for all, and for us to see the suffering that's unnecessary, the suffering with the pandemic, the suffering with economics,
it's been
a lot of people, and then if we come together, we can make a lot of difference.
Absolutely.
We can be a community
Yeah.
on a different level, and we can say, we disagree on things, but we're not going to allow you to go hungry. We're not going to allow you to be.
Yeah.
And that's to me the right of a human being to be fed, to be clothed, and to be loved. And
yeah, I'm all about that. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's weird. Another thing that we, can talk about too is just about there's a lot of things that we can look at, and even if we disagree on the ways to solve these problems, we have agreement that there are problems out there, and that we take responsibility for, we as a collective, not just the left or the right, or not just the Christians or non-Christians, not just the, we as a whole take responsibility for, we want to see unemployment, go to, it has been a very hard year. 2020 has messed with a lot of people, and it's messed with a lot of people on both sides of the aisle. It's something that's affecting us all. And so I think that there can be a uniting sort of call to action, a call to action to be like, okay, well, we have to start saying, okay, these are the values we do agree on. We don't want to see people, harmed unnecessarily. We don't want to see people going hungry. We don't want to see people living out on the streets. We don't want to see people unemployed and not having access to be able to feed their family and stuff. And so from there, I think we can have many really good, productive conversations. People be valued. Yeah,
if they have a different color, if they have a different sexual orientation, you might not agree with some of the lifestyle, but the essence of the human being. So
that's great.
I would beg to differ. I think it's all your fault.
Yeah, I mean,
it's all your fault.
It's a very real possibility. I've thought that many times.
I just think you got to straighten it out. So
yeah, sure.
Tell me by tomorrow. I'll give you a couple days how you figured it out.
Okay, sounds good. By next time.
Management team, and you got to get this.
Yeah, by next time, I'll have figured out all the world's problems, and I'll let you know.
Yes, I'll be waiting for that.
All right, sounds good. Well, good conversation, Dad. And thanks to everybody who's still watching and all the people who commented. It was a very fruitful conversation on there. We'll have to look at some of those comments.
Yeah, definitely. There are some amazing comments on there, so that's awesome. There's stirring up conversation. Now, if anybody got hardcore in their comments, then Jed will answer you.
I'm sure I will. All right.
All right. Part 2 next Monday. Okay.
Right.
Part 4. Okay. Love you, son.
Love you too. Good night.
Okay. Bye-bye.